Welcome to Mind Love, episode 312. Today's episode is all about embracing diversity in spirituality and meeting others where they are. Mark Nepo's guide to building your own spiritual toolbox for compassion, acceptance, and growth.
That's care out of insecurity to try to make everything around you like you. When we're afraid and we're insecure, and we all have moments like that, well, we tend to look only for what will confirm what we already know. And that's not education. Education is, thank God you're not me, tell me what you know. And I'll add what touches my heart and leave the rest. You know, the truth doesn't have to be explained to be true.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
If this is your first time giving your mind a little love, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Mind love is a habit, and the more you give your mind that love and intention, the better you'll feel about yourself and your life. Plus, it's really a win-win because more subscribers means Mind Love attracts even more amazing guests to bring you their wisdom. So don't forget to subscribe. When was the last time you questioned something so deeply rooted within you that it felt like a part of your identity? Maybe it's cultural or the values of your family, or maybe it's the religious beliefs you grew up with, or the spiritual path you were told was the right one. Let's be honest. The spiritual path can sometimes feel like a rigid one-way street. You grow up with certain beliefs, doctrines, and traditions, and they all come with these unspoken rules and dogmas. But what happens when those rules or beliefs don't sit well with you? What if the inconsistencies in the portrayal of the divine begin to gnaw at your very soul? That's what happened to me. Growing up in a religious family, I often felt like the only person who was questioning what I saw as a tangled web of contradictions. The way God was portrayed in church didn't really align with what I felt in my heart. It seemed like God had a totally different persona depending on the day. Even today, deep convos during extended family dinners can be a battlefield, where my own spiritual journey feels like it's being dismissed or invalidated. A common talking point is, I just don't understand how you could be taking this chance. If I die, I know I have nothing to lose. If you deny Jesus, you have everything to lose. Frankly, my programming was so deep, for a while I would wonder, what if she's right? Was I losing my connection to God by daring to question? Was I betraying my family and their belief systems? It took me years to feel confident in my spiritual connection. Half my life, actually. I always intuitively knew that no one religion has a monopoly on God, but I had to untangle all of the dogma from what felt to me as a fear-based religion to be able to move into a state of consciousness where I could really feel that connection. And now, I just know that my spiritual path doesn't need anyone's validation but my own. That realization was so liberating and terrifying all at once. After all, if the connection between God and me is intimate and personal, then it doesn't need a middleman, right? The validation I needed was already there, in my heart, because I was ultimately validated by God. Every time I speak about this, I get so many responses. Turns out, this little battle between traditional beliefs and personal spirituality is pretty common, but it's also painful. For years, I felt like all I wanted was acceptance. And it was Byron Katie's wisdom that helped me see the irony in my struggle. Everything I felt victim to, I was also guilty of. For example, I wanted my family to embrace and accept my beliefs. But was I extending the same acceptance towards theirs? That realization was both humbling and enlightening. As always, the path to understanding begins with self-reflection. The truth is, or I should say my truth is, that almost all paths have the potential to lead to the same place. It's all self-realization, and not the ego self, the self beyond this lifetime, the awareness behind the mind. It's a very personal journey, one that's uniquely yours. Maybe you've dabbled in different spiritual practices or beliefs. Maybe you were even raised believing in one faith. But to me, it's kind of like trying on different outfits. What fits someone perfectly might feel entirely wrong on you. And that's how our spiritual paths are. What works for me might not work for you, and that's okay. What's important is that we find what feels right for us. Our spiritual paths are shaped by our experiences, lessons, what our souls came to this lifetime to learn. What didn't resonate with you might be exactly what someone else needs. It might be their stepping stone to spiritual growth, or precisely the lesson that their soul seeks. And that's something to celebrate, not question. And here's the beautiful part. We can walk our paths and let others walk theirs. We don't have to agree. We don't even have to understand. We just have to be okay with letting others find their way, just like we're finding ours. Because in the end, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about understanding, compassion, and love. It's about giving our minds a little love and letting others do the same. So today we're talking about embracing diversity in spirituality. Our guest is Mark Nepo. He's a poet and philosopher who has taught in the fields of poetry and spirituality for over 30 years. And he's also the author of several books, including The Book of Awakening and Surviving Storms. 3 key things we will learn are how to handle the pressure to conform, how to stay open to different ways of experiencing spirituality, and the concept of eternity as the opening to oneness. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up or text the word morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Mark Nepo to the show.
Oh, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So I'm curious, what initially led you down the path of self-growth?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think to go way back, it began when I was born. No, but no, actually, I mean, I think that before I had any language for that, or even what that was about, when I was a little boy, the world kind of spoke to me through metaphor. I didn't know what that was, but if I was out, wind through the trees, it was like they were going, pay attention. What is this like? What is this like? And so I felt, and then later on I learned, oh, that's a metaphor. But then more emotionally, when I was in high school, the first woman I fell in love with, she was a year ahead and she went to college sooner. So of course, the whole world opened up for her and we broke up and it broke my heart. And so with my first experience of heartache, I began writing as a way to just be in conversation about what was going on. And I realized pretty quickly that this was the beginning of personal growth and that I wasn't just talking to myself. I had begun a conversation with life and the universe. Finally, I would say decades later in my 30s, and probably from my work that I'm a long-term cancer survivor. In my 30s, I almost died from a rare form of lymphoma. And boy, if the other things didn't get me into personal growth, that sure did.
Oh my gosh, I can imagine. I lost my dad to lymphoma back in
Oh,
2004, so it's been a while now, but
no, I'm sorry.
in a
Yeah.
way, that sent me on my path to self-growth, honestly. So my dad definitely played a part in just figuring out the meaning of the world, because I remember feeling angry. At that time, I was raised pretty religious, and it's not something I really resonate with now. I lean more toward a broader spirituality, but I remember feeling angry at God. And so for a long time, that was like, there was no God, there was nothing. And then slowly just kind of trying to find my own peace through all of that, I just reinterpreted my beliefs, I should say.
Sure, sure. Well, I think our beliefs really unfold over time. What I love Ralph Waldo Emerson. He has an insight where he He says, we act our experience out in life before we understand it as truth. He says that any questions we would ask about life appear like hieroglyphics in the next experience, and whatever insights are there, but we don't really get it until we live it. And so I think we just keep evolving as far as we know. I think, I'm 72 now, and when I met someone my age when I was younger, I thought they were ancient. It doesn't seem so old now. But I'm not the same person I was when I was 22 or 32 or 42, and so it's not that who I was then was false. It's that at each stage of growth, I was as true as I knew how to what I understood. And then life, hopefully, we grow through great love or great suffering, both usually. And then now what I understand or am exploring makes that circle larger. And now I'm as true to that as I know. And so, like rings on a tree, we keep growing in our heart and in our consciousness. And so what came before was limited, not false. And wherever we are currently, is more whole, more whole.
Your latest book is called Surviving Storms, and it's really all about the way that we respond to adversity. And I can see why now is the time for this book, especially since 2020. Everything's been a little wild. But I'm curious, when you look at the way most people handle the storms in their lives, where do you think the disconnect is, and where people are basically adding to their own pain versus handling it in a better way?
Well, and these are observations. In all the things we discuss, I always like to say I don't. What I share are examples, not instructions. I don't have any answers. We're all just comparing notes, and we all have this. So that leads into discussing what it is to be human. So we have all these capacities, and we have all these kind of inclinations where we can trip or fall down. And so I think, all the traditions speak about how, especially in the Buddhist tradition, that there's a whole added level of suffering that comes when we try to avoid legitimate suffering. And so we make matters worse. When I'm afraid and I run even further, the fear gets bigger. I will knock things down in my way, and I'll cause more harm. And the pain of life is unavoidable. And in the Buddhist tradition, again, they speak about this as the friction of the wheel of life. It just happens. And having, gone through my cancer journey, it's given me a lens. I come to think of, no one likes suffering. No one says, hey, sign me up, But I think suffering is to humans what erosion is to nature. And we can't stop the wheel of life. Trying to stop the wheel of life is like an ant trying to stop the earth from turning on its axis. And when we, in our humanness, try to stop things from unfolding or run from things, and we have a lot of that going on right now, we double our pain. We make things worse. When we refuse to listen, when we run, when we cut people off, and I think a lot goes down to the age-old choice between love and fear. I think in my case is just like anybody else's. When we go through something, it takes love to have people show up for us. Everyone's afraid. And of course, we're human. But love says, okay, I'm afraid, but I'm in. And then there are people who let their fear run their lives. They say, yeah, I love you, but I can't really go there. Sorry. And, ultimately, while when people don't show up, that hurts, they actually hurt themselves more, because with each choice not to show up, they become less alive. They become more isolated from life and everything around them. So, D.H. Lawrence, the British English poet, he had a novel, known more as a novelist, but he had a poem called Self-Protection. And in it, he asks the question profoundly, Is the best self-protection hiding who you are or being who you are? And it's understandable that we reflexively hide, if something comes our way, we flinch, but we don't have to stay that way. We don't have to make it a home. And we have to regroup and say, okay, what's really being asked of me here?
I don't know why it took me so long to invest in good bedding. I resisted it for years, but something flipped in me about 3 years ago. And now I'm basically a pillow connoisseur. I've tried them all, and I get weirdly excited about good bedding. Because here's the thing, we spend a third of our lives in bed, and the quality of that time affects literally everything else, which is why I'm so excited to tell you about my latest obsession, Lagoon Sleep Pillows. What sets them apart is their matching system. You take a quick 2-minute quiz about your sleep style and your preferences, and then they match you with your perfect pillow. I was matched with their Otter pillow, and I am so impressed. Lately, I've just needed more support, and this seems to cradle me in all the right places. I'm also low-key obsessed with their travel pillow, which I use for way more than just travel. I actually hug it, use it as leg support, and of course, take it on trips with me. Well, the secret is in their adjustable fill. You can add or remove it to get that perfect alignment for your spine. A study even found that the right supportive pillow can improve sleep quality by 63%. And Lagoon lets you try their matched pillow for 100 nights risk-free. Free returns, no questions asked. Falling asleep has never been easier. I toss and turn less and just wake up feeling refreshed every morning. Go to lagoonsleep.com and take their awesome 2-minute sleep quiz to find your match. Use the code MIND for 15% off your first purchase. You know what's funny? We spend so much time feeding our minds, reading books, listening to podcasts, learning new things, but then we grab whatever's convenient to feed our bodies. And I get it. Life is busy, and sometimes a drive-through feels like the only option. But that's why I take Field of Greens. It's a greens powder made with whole organic fruits and vegetables. No extracts, no lab-made stuff, and just 1 scoop a day gives you simple, real nutrition. Field of Greens feeds your body with fruits and vegetables medically chosen to support your heart, vital organs, and immune system. And let me tell you something. Since I started taking it, I've noticed these little changes that show me how nutrient depleted I must have been before. Like the ridges in my nails, gone. My sleep, so much better. And my stomach just feels happy. You know that dreaded afternoon crash that has you reaching for more coffee or sugary snacks? Well, that's not happening for me anymore. When your body is actually nourished, it runs so much better. I've tried other greens powders before, but Field of Greens is genuinely different. The quality is next level, and you can taste it. It's become my go-to, especially on those days when my eating isn't exactly Instagram worthy, because we all have those days, right? And here's the thing. They are so confident that you'll love it too, that they offer a 100% money-back guarantee. That's how much they believe in their product. So I got you 15% off your first order and free rush shipping. Visit fieldofgreens.com and use promo code MINDLOVE. That's promo code MINDLOVE at fieldofgreens.com. fieldofgreens.com. I'm reminded of the last time I saw my dad. He was in a hospice center and he couldn't really talk. And at the time I was 19. And just to give you a little insight into myself as a 19-year-old, I don't think I knew how to be there for people. I don't think I didn't have a lot of tools of anything. I was going through my own stuff, my own trauma that I was still recovering and running from at that time. That's how I protected myself, was just sort of chin up and bear it and pretend like everything was fine, even though I would end up crying when I was alone. And so that was me at the time. And I had to go back home from college, which it was a very easy place to numb all my feelings. It was just partying every single night. And then I had to go home and visit my dad in a hospice center. And I was vacillating between resentment, honestly. And when I was showing up, there was almost this like savior complex. Like, I am doing something so good. And so I almost thank myself for that little, that little almost egotistical approach to that, because my dad couldn't really talk. He wasn't making sense. And I ended up just holding his hand while he slept, and I fell asleep. I'm going to cry talking about this, but my
Oh,
stepdad
yeah.
came and picked me up to take me back to the airport. And I just remember breaking down in the parking lot, like falling to my knees. Well, the next
Hmm.
week, my aunt called and she said, like, your dad's not doing so well. You should come back. And I couldn't. At least I didn't believe I could. I was trying to protect myself and I'm like, I just can't do this again this weekend. Like, give me one more weekend. There's a party I can go to this weekend, you know? Like, I just don't want to think about it. And it was very odd because I ended up having this dream that this one Saturday night, and I got a phone call in the dream. And the only reason I even really knew it was a dream is because there was a landline phone on my bedstand and I didn't have a landline phone. And it was this big red phone. And I answered the phone and it was my dad. And he was just like, I just need you to know that I'm okay. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, you're talking so well. And then I woke up to the phone ringing, my cell phone, and my mom was calling me to tell me my dad had passed. And
Yeah.
so that form of self-protection, the not going there, ended up being, I mean, to this day, I have to reframe that regret because it feels like a regret. And I've done a lot of work about no regrets, things like that,
Yeah.
but it does feel like one. And it just is so ironic that this like attempt to protect myself ended up causing so much more pain. And then that little notion of like just holding my dad's hand while he slept, which just felt so odd for me at that time, being 19. I think I was prescribed copious amounts of Adderall at that time. I could barely sit still, but I was just able to
Yeah.
be in presence. And I think that is one of my favorite moments that I've ever had with
Sure.
my dad, was just
Yeah.
holding his hand and being present with him.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, and this raises a lot of several profound things I think we can explore. And let me just say, for those of us who are listening to us, I mean, the thank you for sharing, and I'll share personally too, because when we share at this level, the details are personal, but we open up things that happen to everybody, and that's how we compare notes. That's why it's valuable. So someone listening may not have gone through exactly what you've gone through, but people will recognize, oh, but this is kind of my version of that's over here. Oh, and that's how we can learn from each other. And so, I would offer, and let me say one other thing as we continue to talk about this and what you shared too, and what I'm sharing, and that is that at the deepest level, life is a mystery, and that involves paradox. Now, paradox is a simple way to approach paradox is it's any moment where more than one thing is true at the same time. And the heart helps us understand paradox if we stay open. The mind wants to choose, well, it's A or B, but the heart says, no, let it all in. Let it all in. You'll understand. Just hang on. So when what and you shared that very like profound and tender moment with your dad, your self-awareness about, oh, I was kind of running and I was 19, and all of that is true. And that's really helpful to know that. And I hear from my own experience, which I'll share, that what's also true is there was no need to go back. You had your moment. It's a myth. It's a romanticized myth. Oh, if you're just there at the end, just come on, make sure you're here at the, like some magical thing. You never know when that moment, if and when that might come, between loved ones and family, and you were there and it happened. You didn't miss anything, and therefore he was able to come to you in a spirit state and say, hey, it's okay. It's okay. We're okay. And your self knowledge is also true. We don't have to choose. So, for me, a moment, does that make sense? Is that?
No one's ever said that to me before, and I don't think I realized how much I needed to hear it. But even when I was walking out of that room that day, my dad couldn't talk, but he gave me this look, and I was very aware that he was aware that that was the last time that he was going to see me. And I could still
Yeah.
just picture that look. And so I've
And
never looked at it that way.
it's an eternal moment. Of course, it's one of your favorite moments. So I had a similar moment. My father, who lived to be 93, he's gone about 7, 8 years now. And we had a very, with my parents, I had a very rocky journey because, first off, they never, they grew up in the Great Depression. They were very intelligent, but very survival oriented. And we're Jewish, and we had history of family who died in the Holocaust. So they were all about survival for my brother and I. Well, and so, they got a mystical poet for a son. They didn't know what to do with me or I with them, and we never really spoke the same language. And when I went through my cancer journey out of fear, they really weren't able to show up for me. And that led to us being estranged for like 15 years. And I finally reconnected with my father in his 80s, and which I'm very grateful for. Never really reconnected with my mother, though I had to see her when at the end of my father's life, of course, to see him. But my moment that was similar to yours was that so my father, who never really understood at all what I went through, almost dying from cancer, my work, I mean, he'd look. I mean, I don't know if he read my books or not. I don't know. I sent them to him. I'm sure he was, proud of me, but he always shied away from talking about it. So I don't think he felt comfortable in that terrain. But so, he wound up having a stroke, and I was living 300 miles away teaching, and I went down to see him and in the hospital. And in the midst of this very busy hospital room, we didn't have a private room, so there were other people, TVs are blaring, my mother and brother are arguing behind me, there's, things buzzing in the hallway, nurses, chaos. And in the middle of all that, he could talk, but it was so hard he gave up. All of a sudden, he looked at me with, sounds like your dad. He looked at me with this depth in his eyes that I never saw him have. And he reached and gripped my hand and wouldn't let it go. And I really believe he was looking into eternity. And he understood that because I had almost died, he knew I knew where he was. And I just, even though we had no words between us, and this went on maybe for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and I just said, I know, Dad, it's okay. And then he finally relaxed his hand, and his eyes kind of went back to normal, the way I normally would see him look like. And like you, and he lived almost another year. And I was coming to try to see him when I got word it was close. But he died while I was on the plane. But I knew in my heart that we had our moment. And I'm glad I was there and aware and awake when it happened. So we never know. And this, I think, also is true about wonderful moments. I mean, those are wonderful moments opened up by painful circumstances. But, wondrous moments, loving moments, beautiful moments. Also, we never know when they're going to appear. And this leads us to the whole journey of staying awake to every moment that we can, so we don't miss the mystery when it shows up.
There's a period of time, and it's something that I still have to catch myself with, because I have so many tools, so much language. I've been doing this for a while, just trying to learn the different ways, and like you, in a way that almost created a bigger gap between me and people I've grown up with, because it just feels like we're not relating in the ways that we used to, and it becomes harder to communicate the more language that I have for things, in a way. And I started to find that I put a lot of pressure on myself, where I think, well, I'm the one who knows what's happening here. And that might be just my ego pretending to be spirituality. But it's like, well, I'm the one who knows what's happening here. I'm the one who can better deal with this. I'm the one who should be able to work through this. And it'll be, I was actually on a walk the other day and I was doing this to myself. and and I'm like sitting there thinking that I'm in the present moment. Well, walking there thinking that I'm in the present moment. And I'm like, I'm so aware. But then I'm like, I'm not having all of these thoughts in the present moment. These thoughts exist somewhere else. Like, how do you deal with something like that? Because you did go through this with your parents, and it did create what some people might look at as missed time, another thing to kind of look back and regret on.
Well, there's a couple of things that I would share. I mean, and again, in the sense of paradox, that if there's been a teacher in the last 10 years that I'm now a student of, it's the mystery that all things are true. All things aren't fair, all things aren't just, but all things are true. And so I'm committed to keeping my heart open to all sides. So on the one hand, I knew that yes, there were people in my life, or who would say, "Oh, gee, you missed all those years with your parents. Isn't that a shame?" Well, that's the connections that matter. They don't always appear the same way. That's just not how it happened for me. When I had that moment with him, and I had one or two other moments like that, so there were maybe two or three. That's how it happened. We had a lifetime conversation without words in a few minutes. And if I insist on seeing it as what didn't happen, I miss what did happen. It just didn't appear the way it usually does for people. For me, it was different. And I can't choose how it shows up. I can only be there for it or not. So, would I have loved to have more time with him? Oh, I suppose so, but I wouldn't love him any less or more if it appeared differently. It just is, that's how it happened. And so this opens up, one of the other great things. I mean, I'm a student of all traditions. Some of the things we're talking about are just bringing up some of the Buddhist principles. But one of the great kind of views of the Buddhist way of thinking is this practice called seeing things as they are, which is at once the simplest and most difficult practice of all. Because being human, we inflate things and deflate things. We see what's not there as opposed to what is there. And so when we can see what's really there, we can feel it and we can accept. And that leads us into the lifelong practice of acceptance. Like, that's what we had. That's it. And I'm grateful for it because I could have not had those moments. So on the one hand, there's that. And the other thing that what you were raising, which makes total sense, and this raises a double-edged practice of being sensitive. So it's wonderful that you have stumbled into the language of wakefulness and personal growth, and certainly, all my life with words. But one of the things that on the positive side, or on the joining side, is that that's our language. There are many languages of spirit, and it's incumbent on us to stay open, like those translators at the UN. We have to try to stay open to what's everybody's language. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I have a friend. We're not really close anymore, but we were for many years. And he saw himself, still does, as an atheist, but he had this love of jazz music. He was actually a DJ on a radio station for several years, and his knowledge and love of jazz was unbelievable. Like, we would get together once a month, and he'd make a playlist because he wanted me to hear all these different cuts, and he'd say, "Oh, listen to this. Do you hear that? Do you hear that?" And I couldn't hear half of what he was hearing because that wasn't my language. And then what I loved more than anything was he would listen to these things and he'd start to cry. He was feeling such joy at hearing this music. And that was his language. And if I said, "Oh, he's an atheist. Yeah, he likes jazz, but what does he know?" I would have not. I grew for listening for spirit through his language. Not better or less than mine, just different. Just like birds have different bird songs. So I have another friend who he was raised by a minister, so he hates religion, So, but he really is so intrigued with quantum physics. So we can talk about spirit through the language of quantum physics. I don't care. So on the one hand, if I meet you with my heart and your heart, how do I say, what What's your language for being alive? Tell me about that, and I'll tell you about mine. Now, the other side of that is, again, all things are true, is this is a different axis, and that's the axis of people who life has brought them to want to grow and look even at difficult things, and other people who don't want to look and are afraid, and that fear is ruling them, and they will push it away. They don't want to. So that's different than different language. That's very difficult, and we have a lot of that in the world today, in our modern society. A lot of people that have been and again, not with judgment, but with compassion, because I could wake up tomorrow, have something happen, and I'll become like that. And then I'll need you, if you're my friend, to help remind me, hey, you're afraid and hurt, but that's not it. That's not it. Come on, let's come back here into what matters. So, we're not asked, we are asked to, how can I find the language, the spiritual language that comes out of everybody's heart? But we're not asked to give ourselves away. So I don't, if you don't want or you can't go there, it's not okay for you to criticize or minimize my language for spirit, my experience. So again, all things are true. So we have to learn how to stand in our truth, but our truth isn't the only truth.
Mm-hmm. This brings up something that's been recently happening to me. I've been working with acceptance, probably will for my whole life. But the amount of times that I realize that I think I'm accepting things, and then if I actually just sit with it a moment, I'm like, no, I'm accepting the chance that this could change is what I'm accepting. And so one of the sort of life struggles I have is because of my religious background, and there's people in my family that still are very attached to that religion, and it always feels like pressure. And like I told you, I went through a period of time where I was like, there's nothing beyond what is right here. And then now I have this whole, my spiritual beliefs are constantly evolving because I'm constantly trying to stay open and learn. Well, I was having this sort of internal struggle with a family member, just like, how do I convince somebody I'm not going to hell? Or like, why are you putting this fear on me? And again, I recognized these like internal prayers or meditations I was doing ultimately was about the other person changing versus me accepting. And so I was trying to just ask for guidance of a way to be more accepting and to let things roll off me. So it's like developing these little mental tricks, like just sending love. And whenever I get triggered, just being like, oh, I love you. And when I think about it deeply, there's like this air of pompousness kind of to it, I think. But anyway, so I've been asking for this for a while now. Well, in the last 2 years, I've gone through I've read a lot of biblical scholarship. I've just been on a journey. Like, where is this next thing taking me? So this one book mentions a book, then I buy that book, then I kind of go to that. Well, long story short, long story still long, to be honest, is that now I've been going through a Course in Miracles. And what's interesting is that, so I would try to meet my family where they are and use words like God, even when I wasn't comfortable with it. But then I would be going through something and I'm in a vulnerable state and they'd be like, well, just talk to Jesus. And I would get triggered because I'm like, that's not my language. Why can't you meet me where I am? I'm trying to do that for you. Like in my mind, this is what's going on. Well, I've been led to A Course in Miracles and I actually love what I'm learning so far through it. But it's been removing the blocks around language that I've had because it does use very Christian terminology. It talks about the Holy Spirit and Jesus and all of this stuff. And so I can feel things melting away and I'm able to meet somebody where they are more. But it's just so funny because I had this whole idea in my head the last couple of years about how good I've been doing meeting somebody where they are, when in reality, now I can see back. And I don't think I was doing a very good job at all.
Well, thank you. And I think what that brings up for me, a couple of things that I've learned over the years is, one is that why are we meeting people where they are? And I think it's not to change them. It's to grow from meeting someone where they are, just be who we are and to learn from who they are. And yes, it's not okay for others to impose on us. So we have to stand firm in what we know, because that's not really love. That's care out of insecurity to try to make everything around you like you. So when we're afraid and we're insecure, and we all have moments like that, well, we tend to look only for what will confirm what we already know. And that's not education. Education is, thank God you're not me, tell me what you know, and I'll add what touches my heart and leave the rest. I think there's this, the truth doesn't have to be explained to be true. Someone says you're going to go to hell. Well, what's that got to do with you? What's that going to, other than the relationship being misperceived and that hurts, and those are relational things. But as far as the truth as you know it has nothing to do with your truth. It's a miss. It doesn't hit at all. And I think, this brings up another paradox. I'm a dedicated lifelong teacher, and I love being in teaching circles. And I've come to the conclusion humbly that you can't change anyone. So what am I doing? Well, it's changed my understanding of what it is to be a teacher, because I think what it is to be a teacher now is to be like a greenhouse. You provide light and warmth and a safe container, and then the life before you will grow as it is meant to grow, not how I would like it to grow, or how I think it should grow, or what I think is right for it to grow. That's presumptuous. That's not my business. My business is to provide light and warmth so things and people in our company together can grow as they were born to grow. And so this leads to, and this has helped me. I've said I'm a student of all paths, and I was raised Jewish. I have a great tie to the Jewish heritage. But during my cancer journey, like I said, I was just upended, inside out and upside down, and terrified of everything. And I was blessed to have people from all faiths, formal and informal, offer me some kind of help. So when I still landed here alive, I was not, and it's 35 years later, and I'm still not wise enough to know what worked or what didn't. And I feel like I was challenged to believe in everything. And I've been a student of all paths ever since. All my books focus on all the paths and the different tools they offer. And I encourage everyone, make your own toolbox. Take whatever speaks to your heart from every tradition and make your own spiritual toolbox to help you through life. We don't have to, you can find a home in one particular tradition. But that's not how it's worked for me. And the metaphor, just like, the metaphor of suffering being like erosion came from going through cancer. Well, the other thing that came from this blessing of being helped is, it helps me understand all the different traditions, is the metaphor of springtime. So every year, thousands of insects and birds pollinate spring. Each one is born to find a particular nectar and pollinate a particular flower, tree, or shrub or fruit. Now, if the bees came along and said, hey, we're all going to do it our way, they were fundamentalist bees, you wouldn't have spring. It wouldn't work. We need that diversity because we don't know which, and I think spiritually, we need all the traditions, even including atheist and agnostic. We need all the different, because we never know which one is going to touch the heart, just like jazz touched the heart of my friend. We don't know which one will speak to each of us to bring us alive, for us to pollinate the human spring. So we don't have to choose. In fact, it's deadly to choose. History is filled with the deadly choices of do it my way, do it my way. And I've come to think, like, if you believe in anything larger than yourself, I'd say you're a mystic. Now, as soon as we try to name what's larger than us, everybody goes to their corners. It's Jesus, it's Allah, it's Moses, it's Buddha, it's nature, it's physics, it's, on and on and on. And I don't really, as I get older, I don't really care what we call it. I just want to know how you relate as a part in a living universe, because that helps us live. That helps us live. So I think that, what I have come to is when I find people insisting on their way, I'm really not interested in that conversation. It just, because if it goes nowhere, and then all it does by me engaging it is draw me into it, then I'm stuck in like a dead end road, and I can't change someone. I can provide light and warmth, and given what happens to them, maybe we'll connect sometime.
I recently read, I think it was in A Course in Miracles, talking about putting your energy towards opposing something is, in a way, affirming it. It's like affirming that this is a worthwhile conversation to have, whatever way you want to look at that affirmation. But I am kind of in the same camp of where I have grown to realize that everything's just another method towards self-realization or towards whatever it is that we individually are seeking. I guess sometimes that's even different. For me, I've always looked at it ironically as I have this quest to find the truth. I need to know the truth. And like you said earlier in this conversation, sort of embracing this idea that multiple things can be true, even if it seems paradoxical. And I've had, like, for years been like, I wish these family members would stop trying to change my reality, would stop trying to challenge everything that I have found for myself. And then so I come to the conversation and I'm arguing against these things. And I'm like, am I not trying to change what you believe? I should be so happy and grateful that you found something that works so well for you, that you're so solid in. I'm still searching, and I have those pillars as well. But every time that I get tensed or triggered about it, it just shows that my foundation is shakeable versus just sort of standing in my own light, standing with my own beliefs, embracing the difference between us, and just being grateful that we're both glad to find it.
I would also offer that in our modern world, being certain and sure is not having a strong foundation always, that we are continually growing and learning. And, it's interesting, the word, I'm often interested in the original definitions of words because they're more whole. Over time, words erode too. And so a word, self-confidence, we kind of think of that as sureness and certainty. And that's not what self-confidence originally means, because the word confidence comes from the Latin confidere, and it means fidelity. So self-confidence is fidelity to the journey of the true self. Fidelity to the journey of the true self, not certainty, not sureness, not never having a question. It's quite the opposite. To me, it's living a life of questions. It's staying true to the evolving of how spirit evolves in us over time.
I'm reminded of something you said earlier in this conversation when we were talking about the idea of regretting missed time with people versus that moment that you had with your dad that I had with my dad. I was listening to Ram Dass the other day, and he talked about how eternity is in the present moment. And so when you think about just sharing a present moment with somebody, you've shared eternity with them. And this sort of reminds me of what we're talking about now, because often the goal is to, be in the present moment. Don't get caught up in the future worries and the past regrets. And this present moment, though, is ever changing. And so to allow yourself the growth, to allow the kind of fluctuating nature of that present moment, and to just be there and accepting and loving of what's in it for you. I don't know, it can transform so many different conversations of like just allowance. And
yeah, so Ram Dass is wonderful, and he was an amazing spirit. And this notion that in many traditions And I think we misunderstand, to be in the moment is not just for what it keeps us from the past or the future. To be fully in the moment is to stay open with our heart so that when we experience all of life at once. We experience through, this is why when you walk in the woods and the light falls on a particular leaf or a stone and you hold it up and it seems like it glows or something's magical, it's because through your openness of heart, you are connecting through a particular thing, and all the energy and electricity of spirit from everywhere else, you're tapping into it. It's like these moments are seams to the living universe. So eternity is like when you drop a stone in the water and it ripples. It's not stacking years one on top of another. It's the opening, it's the experience. The reason to be in the moment is we experience oneness. So let me share that one of the other profound moments for me with my father, because it's an example of this. So a few months after that moment I shared earlier, I was visiting him. He was still in the same hospital room, and I was wonderfully had alone time with him. And there I was, like a lot of people find, I was feeding my father applesauce with a spoon. All of a sudden, my heart was breaking, and it was sad and beautiful and wonderful and everything all at once. And everything I'd ever learned was all now in the moment of I just wanted to this dance of feeding him this spoon of applesauce, didn't want to hit his teeth or interrupt his breath, and just this thing, and I'm crying, and we're doing this, and he's reaching with his mouth, and all of a sudden, I tripped in. It was a moment of wonder, even though it was a difficult moment, and I tripped into the moment somehow of every adult child feeding a dying parent. I wasn't alone. And what I've come to understand from that moment, because earlier I mentioned Emerson, and that was a good example for me that I didn't understand it till I lived it. So from that moment, I've come to understand that when we can be thoroughly who we are, be authentic and real, when I am thorough to the bottom of my heart, then I trip into the history of all hearts. Then I trip into the moment. If I am loving, if I love you or my wife or my dog completely, I trip into the moment of everyone who ever loved a dog. And likewise, when I can feel the pain of someone, I trip into the history of pain. And we experience this moment, this felt glimpse of oneness. That's the reward for being in the moment. We have to pull out of the future and the past to turn ourselves over. But it's like talking about, when Gandhi talked about nonviolence. Well, he didn't just talk about nonviolence. The word that he was using in Hindu was ahimsa, which means harmony and harmlessness. So you have to be nonviolent to get there, but just being nonviolent doesn't name what it is. Just like, okay, being in the moment, we won't get too far ahead and we won't get tangled in the past. Well, that's necessary, but that's not what entering the moment is.
That's such a beautiful way to look at it because so often people feel alone in their pain unless they have like all these people holding hands with them crying. But most often, I feel like people feel alone in their pain. But just the fact that you're opening yourself and allowing yourself to feel it, you unite with everyone else who's ever experienced pain if you let yourself.
Well, the reward for being thorough in our own experience is that then we can feel other living things. That's almost the requirement to experience oneness, and we can glimpse it mentally, but that's not feeling it. That's not entering it.
So much of self growth is allowing yourself time to reflect and to, self inquiry and noticing things like that. But I'm curious, as a teacher, how do you balance your creative process of allowing the moment and just seeing what's in it for me, and then also kind of capturing things to reshare with people? Because I found I can kind of get, I'm like, should I be just letting this, or should I be writing this down? Or
I think I felt that tension when I was younger, and I've learned over time there's been a beautiful rhythm that has opened up. So when and I think that writing for me has become over the years listening and taking notes. So I am learning, I'm retrieving, I'm always on in inquiry. And then when I write and explore, then I take what I'm learning into the circles, teaching circles that I'm guiding, and basically say, here's this story, here's this metaphor. What do we do with this? Let's look at it together. And then as people share, like we've been sharing, then when people share, if they're real and I'm real, then they open up a conversation where to be with them, I find myself giving voice to what I didn't know I knew, that I wouldn't say or write down if I were just by myself. So then I come out of that now and I take notes so that I can take those notes and go back in my solitude to explore them further. And so there's this really beautiful rhythm between writing inquiry and the teaching space.
it just reminds me of the sort of exponential wisdom of minds coming together.
Absolutely. We are more, there's a beautiful tradition in Native American tradition that the elder councils for hundreds of years, and today too, they still meet in circle, and not just because of equity, because there's no head to a circle. They meet in circle so that everyone has a direct view of the center. And what I love about that is the assumption is no one view is enough. We need what you see and you see and you see. So if whatever you put in the center, whatever we want to discuss or look at, it's like a prism. It has many facets. So we need what you see from your side of the circle. And so forget, the older I get, I'm not interested in debate or persuasion or argument. I'm interested, we gather meaning, we don't choose it.
I love leaving listeners with something to focus on for the week to sort of ground what we've been talking about into their lives. So, what would you have somebody who's going through something difficult? What would be one practice or one thing to focus on that might help them this week?
Well, one thing that I know I always try to do and practice is, fear, pain, difficulty, they make us tense up and kind of pull back. It's a reflex, but we don't have to stay there. And so the challenge, of course, is when we're feeling that, how do we open our heart, hold nothing back, and lean back in? And so what I try to do very simply is take a deep breath and then give my full attention to the nearest part of life that's near me, until it becomes my teacher. It could be a fly on the wall. In the Hindu tradition, there's a term, upa guru. It means the teacher that is next to you at this moment. So particularly when I'm in stress or afraid, just when I say, oh yeah, great, I'm going to take a breath. Well, I'm going to do this now. Yeah. And give your full attention beyond your saying, oh, okay, I don't have patience for this, until you've dropped all agendas and you're looking for the pattern of what's happening before you so that it can be your teacher, that it can help you.
Well, thank you so much for your time in this conversation. I feel like I'm leaving 3 months of therapy right now. So for listeners who are resonating with you and want to learn more about your books, where's the best place for them to connect?
Oh, well, my website, marknepo.com, and you'll find all where I'm teaching and things that I'm doing. Everything is there. My books. And you can find my books pretty much anywhere.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/312. Your challenge for this week is pretty simple. We're not going to focus on our own acceptance. We're going to focus on the acceptance of others. So think about someone whose choices you don't understand. It can be on their spiritual path or anything else. And instead of using your ego mind to try to understand, be okay with the fact that you might not. And instead, just bless that person. Send them some loving kindness. There is real science between loving kindness meditations and what it does to our minds, our bodies, our physiology when we send out that loving kindness to somebody else. It's like the concept that in order to receive, we have to give first. So focus on that this week, whenever you think about it, whenever you feel yourself boiling with anger or being frustrated with another person, just stop yourself and send them loving kindness. And let me know how you feel. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. You can find all of my sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. There's some incredible ones there with some incredible deals, so check out that page. If you want step-by-step guidance to creating a more intentional life this year, consider joining the Mind Love membership at mindlove.com/membership. Every month, there's a new masterclass that's designed to help you design more intention into your life. So that's at mindlove.com/membership. You also get access to a ton of meditations and a bunch of exclusive episodes as well. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.